Greetings. Today's talk focuses on the fact that there are 5 new secrets of the Gigafactory that have been revealed that I thought we all should be aware of and know about, and that I think you'll find interesting. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is the first time on our channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Also wanted to note we're on Patreon and could use support there if you would. And we do have a few ads, 2 or 3 ads per show, and just 10 seconds of it would be helpful in terms of supporting the ability of the channel to continue growing. So there was a newspaper called the Reno Gazette, and on December 3rd they came out with an article about a tour of the Gigafactory that revealed some very interesting information. The tour included Mr. Lister, who's the head of the factory, as well as the head of the Panasonic USA, Mr. Shaw, sort of discussing in general, I want to say several fascinating topics that were brought up about the Gigafactory. I think the hugest, biggest item on our list actually turns out to be the fact that there's a handshake process. So when you look at the Gigafactory, the discussion is of the fact that it's just another Tesla facility and sort of wholly owned and managed by Tesla. The first of our 5 surprises or secrets of the Gigafactory is that Panasonic has a handoff process. Once the battery cell has been created and sealed, there's actually a conveyor belt that brings, I believe the number is as many as 3 million cells a day from the Panasonic portion of the factory over to the Tesla portion of the factory, and this is called the handshake. Now, I was really shocked, stunned, amazed, and glad to hear about the fact that there was, in fact, this handshake. And the reason is a concept called vertical integration. So one of the big discussions of Tesla has been the fact that when Tesla is 82% vertically integrated, what this means is that the company, in essence, produces from scratch 82% of what it actually produces. And while this is good from a control standpoint, it's bad from a cash management standpoint. So what this handshake with Panasonic brought up was the fact that Tesla, in essence, owns the building and has a separate company called Panasonic that's manufacturing a product inside of that building. Once that product is manufactured, it is then shipped to the Tesla portion of the factory. And at that portion of the factory, that's when it transitions from Panasonic Corporation to Tesla Corporation. So what this facilitates is the fact that Tesla can get terms on the battery from its own factory. So what that might mean then is you'll notice that during the last earnings announcement, it was announced that Panasonic lost $100 million while Tesla made $300 million. What Tesla can actually do is say to Panasonic, hey, I know we have 30-day terms typically, but we need a little extra time. Can we have 90 or 120 days? And Panasonic will agree to that. So in essence, what Tesla is starting to do is use Panasonic's balance sheet as a way to help manage its own cash positions. And I think that's smart, efficient, done by many companies. And, I think it's a smart move. And in general, the battery cost is supposed to be half the cost of electric vehicles at this point. I think for Tesla, it's maybe 30% and declining when it comes to the Model 3. But this is big news because it actually illustrates the point of the fact that Tesla has a way to manage cash that was unexpected previously, and all the drone videos suggesting it was only Tesla as a manufacturing company in the building might be inaccurate, and this answer sort of illustrates points that I think are really important to note. The second sort of secret or bombshell that emerged from this article is the fact that there's a company called H&T Nevada, which is a division of a German company that I believe, by the way, is public in case you guys want to check out the stock as a potential low-risk investment. H&T is a manufacturer of housing for housings that go around, that are the outside of the battery, basically. So H&T is a global entity doing these battery housings for entities around the world. This is another example of the non-vertical integration that was claimed, but less vertical for Tesla, which is impressive, because in essence, both Panasonic and H&T are manufacturing within the Tesla building, but they're both separate entities with separate invoicing to Tesla Corporation, and it helps increase the financial flexibility for the company to have outside suppliers and also have them in a position where you can have a just-in-time process for those outputs to be integrated into the Tesla system. Another note on H&T that I think is sort of 2.5 is the fact that the suggestion or my thoughts on how the Tesla battery pack worked was simply that it was an empty container into which chemicals were poured. And it turns out that it was suggested in the article that the relationship between the metal and the liquid inside the battery involves more of what they called a pastry. So there are ways in which the metal actually reaches through the cross section of the battery. And I thought this was also interesting because it shows how if you have to heat or cool the battery, having, in essence, probes a portion of the outside shell that reaches inside the battery container means that it's another method that one can use to control heat. And as we all know, how you manage that heat big time affects battery degradation and whether or not you get longevity from it. So I thought it was really interesting to hear about this because it really shows Tesla's emphasis on how you manage heat within the battery and therefore get longevity through that process. And so even though it was kind of a minor point, it seemingly, I actually didn't realize that it was possible to have heating elements, in essence, that are run crisscrossing the battery or embracing the materials in the battery to help manage the heating and cooling process better. And I think it's smart and efficient. And I was kind of surprised because it clearly lowers the amount of material that can be in the battery, but the concession relative to heat maintenance and management is a good one. It also highlights the question mark of whether or not the pouch technology actually works, because the thought is if you're trying to run probes from a soft pouch, it might be harder to get it to work as well relative to heat management within that battery, and therefore the battery pack more largely. The third element of this discussion is one part of the Gigafactory that's been discussed but not shown even in this article is the fact that if you have a pack, if your vehicle suddenly has issues or battery degradation in a portion of the battery, or it's had degradation over time and you want that battery upgraded by Tesla, that pack can be pulled out, a temporary pack put in, and that can be shipped back to the Gigafactory, and they will actually identify the cells that have now degraded and can swap those cells out and with new cells and ship that back to be reinstalled in your vehicle. So this kind of maintenance work is being done, and because, let's say, you're talking about the ballpark of 4,000, if you will, batteries that are inside of a pack, the ability to do this, I think, increases the longevity of the battery, because now you have the possibility of it being repaired and then put back into the vehicle versus the whole pack having to be tossed out. The third, or so I guess we're sort of on number 4, heading for number 5. I was actually impressed that Mr. Lister actually took the time with the Reno Gazette to review sort of major developments at the plant, including the 3 shifts of folks that are operating for 24 hours a day. They did reference some numbers in terms of productive activities that were going on in terms of number of batteries produced daily, as well as they threw out some sort of completed pack numbers, which I thought were questionable in terms of what those numbers were. They were sort of hiding. It was articulated by the folks at Panasonic that you can look at the production process for the Panasonic batteries through Windows, but no one that's not a Panasonic employee is allowed actually in that portion of the factory. Partially proprietary information as well as cleanliness impacting that. I thought that was kind of an interesting circumstance as well. You'll notice that there are a number of shows, including CBS, etc., that have gone through to look at sort of the movement of materials through the factory, etc. But there's really no clear everything, where everything is, what everything is being done picture that you can get of the inside of the building, even though, as you can see, I've chosen to continue to show footage that's been provided by Tesla to us, so you can get a feel for what's going on at the Tesla facility at this time. The 5.0 here is the fact that Tesla is, we all know that the factory continues to grow. At this point, the big holdup for the next sort of tranche of battery growth and battery pack growth, and therefore the number of vehicles that can be produced, is the fact that Tesla has to build new lines relative to automated processes for handling the produced batteries and turning them into packs, in terms of sort of the put together of the pack and the thermal management system, where each of the batteries receives the ability to be air conditioned and cooled by itself. The final note that was sort of random was the fact that Tesla has now increased its sort of employment in the area by about 45% plus, and growing based on how big the Gigafactory will be getting. So this is another sort of minor issue, but as I said, I believe that the biggest issue that's major is in both the case of H&T Nevada as well as as Panasonic. The handoff process for me is huge, because it does show that Tesla has ways to help manage its cash via leveraging accounts payable, and I think that allows them to, in essence, use the balance sheet of those suppliers to help fuel the company if, in fact, there's a need for cash or cash management. I think that's a smart move and unexpected. We will put a link for the article that was in the Reno Gazette at the bottom of this afterwards, so you can all read through it as well. Other notes that I wanted to make from the article was there are photos of the two heads of both the factory and Panasonic's U.S. battery operations, as well as images of completed packs, etc. This actually also answers an interesting question that had been popping in mind, which was, there's a battle right now between whether the pack or pouch solutions are going to be the answer going forward for the next couple of years before we get to solid state. And the fact that Tesla has, I want to say, structural ways, for example, elements of the outside shell that reaches into the battery to help with cooling. I think it may slow the process to transition because you have to basically build the battery and have it in large numbers of usage and see how that performance is, and therefore determine what modifications might be appropriate. And it just seems to me that there's a trade-off between whether or not you have a setup that'll be able to manage the heat from the in and out of the electricity, and it has to be, I think, long-term tested. Otherwise, you have severe battery degradation that makes it very difficult to have your vehicle on the road long-term, which Tesla has not experienced, and it really shows both the research and the choices that Tesla has been making are superior and provide a superior product. So hats off to the folks at Tesla. It's nice to see the Gigafactory working well, and Mr. Lester also took the time out to review bottlenecks that have occurred over time and looking at ways to increase speed, but recognizing the need to sort of blend human beings with robots, etc., as a way to complete, particularly on things that robots might be better at than human beings. The last thing so this sort of closes out our sort of 5 secrets of the Gigafactory that I thought, were useful. Wanted to move into a discussion of sort of what's going on with Tesla and its stock. It's been down as much as, I'm going to say, from the mid-370s into the 350s now. And we're probably going to do a show on this, but this is really the last gasp for the large organizations, the hedge funds that are shorting the stock. The interesting thing is we're in something called the quiet period, where a company is not allowed to really announce anything that might move the stock materially prior to earnings. So even though Tesla is producing a lot of vehicles, things like giving up information about what's happening with the production numbers is not going to happen right now because it's basically against the law. So what tends to happen in this period is, number one, you can have analyst upgrades, which is the analysts estimating what production might have been throughout the Tesla Corporation. But other than those upgrades, what tends to happen in this portion of sort of the Tesla sort of stock life cycle is this is a free run period where hedge funds that pay a lot of money to PR organizations and to news organizations can kind of throw out ideas and have those ideas ride out into the marketplace and not be refuted by the company because the company can't say anything just before earnings, but it can sort of put thoughts in people's mind about whatever it is that they've decided to put out there. And in this case, it can start to tank the stock a little bit, which is what really ticks off Elon Musk. In this case, the big mover for the stock has been the fact that there's a suggestion that Tesla is in a bad position right now relative to sales of the Model 3 because the company has tapped out user demand for those vehicles and is heading into a period where they're in trouble because they don't have enough people that will be buying the Model 3 because of how exhausted they are from purchases. They've exhausted the demand for those purchases already. I find this quite stunning, amazing that the entities that are putting out this information are getting away with it. And the main reason is that, number one, Tesla has been on a tear in terms of production right now because of the number of people that are wanting to have the $7,500 tax credit before the end of the year. So the numbers for Tesla are phenomenal. The next question is, did that wipe out demand for an extended period? The answer is, it don't matter. And the reason it doesn't matter is that Tesla is about to enter what I consider to be a shortage of Model 3s in the United States. Right now, they're able to produce consistently, call it 6,000 Model 3s a week. And based on agreed upon shipping from Tesla, 3,000 of those vehicles a week are now going to start going to Europe. And if we send 400 to 500 a week to places like China that has now started their process of deliveries. This basically means that only having 2,000 to 3,000 cars available in the United States for the foreseeable future, probably the next year, is actually a fairly low number, because there'll be a lot of people coming off leases or liking what others have seen done with the Model 3s or experience with their Model 3s that may be wanting to buy the car. But I actually think the opposite is happening in the United States, which is I think we're entering a shortage period, because what I believe is going to occur is that the European buyers are going to start getting their cars in February, and there are as many as 50,000 to 100,000 people in the greater Europe area that are waiting for their Model 3s on the higher price performance and dual motor side.